Good morning and welcome to our small garden in Kent, southeast England. Thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to have your company. Every morning there is so much in the garden to breathe in and soak in. But the first thing is to greet the bees. I've been thinking lately how the garden is a living journal. Every day of every season marks a different entry, as buds swell and open, as petals fade and fall, as skies shift and colours change. But we can never turn back a page, not even by a day. The tale constantly moves forward in a myriad of beautiful ways. And we write only part of the unfolding chronicle. We are co-authors with nature's forces. So find that gentle moment in your day, first thing in the morning if you can. Pause, soak in the day's garden entry, half written as it may be, and commit it to memory. For tomorrow the garden will turn its page again. This is Lauren's Grape, grown from seed, one of Monty Don's favourite opium poppies. In flower, it provided eye-catchingly rich, plummy-purple opulence to the stylish planting in his dog-friendly garden at the Chelsea Flower Show. Lauren's Grape is a glaucous-leaved summer annual herb, thrives in full sun to partial shade, grows in any moist but well-drained soil or compost, is drought-tolerant once established, matures in a columnar form up to 90 centimetres or 35 inches tall, is highly beneficial to bees but toxic to humans and pets. Wear gloves when handling. Provides gorgeous ornamental seed heads after flowering. Is hardy down to -15 to -10 Celsius or 5 to 14 Fahrenheit. Look how our Lauren's Grape seedlings have romped away in the last 4 weeks. In our May garden tour, I showed you our small space hack for optimizing space by using an outdoor tabletop to cover a water butt, and at the time I mistakenly referred to the poppy seedlings growing on the top as Patty's plum. But no, this is Lauren's grape, not Patty's plum. I must have got my mind in a bit of a fruit salad for a muddled moment, but there was no mistake made in choosing this cultivar, because Lauren's grape is a sublimely intense jewel of a poppy chalice. At the RHS and BBC Radio 2 dog garden, which features trees for shade, a shallow stream for paddling in, and a perfectly imperfect lawn for rolling on whenever the urge takes you, or your beloved dog if it so wishes, there were two plants that everyone wanted to know about. The first, unsurprisingly, was sumptuously gorgeous Lauren's grape, and the second was at the other end of the plant show-off spectrum. This tall, understatedly attractive branching plant, known as common figwort, is covered with loose clusters of tiny green russet-edged flowers, and also covered with bumblebees. Its botanical name is Scrophularia nodosa, which sounds like a disease. That is currently on my plant wish list just for its powerhouse pollinator provision, but I could also see that our Lauren's grape seedlings are going to please the bees immensely when they flower in our garden. At 200 square metres, the beautifully designed dog garden was twice the size of our modest plot at home. And Monty's opium poppies were all planted in generous borders, which is ideal for their moisture-seeking roots. But I'm going to pot ours on into clay containers as part of the patio display. At first glance, this looks deceptively like an empty pot, but it's not. I've removed the top dressing of gravel, and these stalks are the remains of our gloriously vibrant spring tulips, Princess Irene. These are reliably perennial tulips growing in the same containers for 4 years, and while the tulip bulbs go dormant over summer and autumn, I thought, why not grow an annual opium poppy above them? Because the tulip leaves have died back and all the energy for next year is already stored in the bulb. The compost level has dropped over the years as rain and watering has slowly washed out the growing medium. So adding compost above does mean the bulbs are suddenly inches further from the surface than before, but that's fine, as the main issue with planting depth is when bulbs are too shallow rather than too deep. So I'm first going to snip off the stubs of the original stalks without disturbing the bulbs. The compost I'm going to add is a store-bought general-purpose peat-free variety. Peat-free because it's best to avoid depleting our unique and biodiverse peatlands, which also happen to be important carbon stores. And here's our first poppy. If you're wondering about the gravel on top, I do heap a little gravel around the seedlings, otherwise when I water them, the compost seems to wash away and expose their taproot and they tilt over, so the gravel helps prevent this, plus retains moisture. For a moment I thought I'd knocked off an early flower bud, but this is actually a little fruitlet, a baby apple from the natural process known as the June drop, whereby our apple tree sheds excess fruits. So rather unhelpfully I managed to remove the root ball from the pot off camera, but it's healthy and a nice solid mass, definitely ready for potting on. Then the milk bottle scoop comes into play to fill the pot with compost up to the existing top level of the poppy root ball, no higher. This compost contains 3 months' worth of plant feed, although opium poppies are not especially nutrient hungry. I particularly love the glaucous wavy margined leafage. As the plant matures, foliage at the bottom of the stalk can go a little yellow, so just gently pull away unsightly specimens and fresh new leaves will quickly grow in their place. 2 more important steps are watering in and replacing the tulip plant label so that I don't lose track of the fact that my precious princess bulbs are in here. So planting that first poppy was a very straightforward process, and now I've got the second plant ready to transplant into another clay pot containing our Princess Irene bulbs. But there's a problem. The depth of the poppy root ball far exceeds the available space at the top of the pot. But while I'm thinking of a solution, let's take a look at the lovely root ball easing out of the plastic pot, caught on camera this time. Again, this plant is really ready for a larger container. The height difference is a bit too great to just mound the earth up around the root ball, so I thought about using pieces of slate or shells as a mini retaining wall, but that didn't quite work. So finally, I decided on these circular bamboo craft hoops, which are inexpensive items sold for dried floral displays or embroidery. They're already bound together by zip ties, but if you don't like the plastic look, then traditional jute twine or natural ribbon are good substitutes. So I added an initial small layer of compost and pushed the hoops down firmly to bed them in, and now I'm filling with fresh compost again. This is a good solution for adding height to bulb containers for annual summer plants, but not effective long term if you're adding small perennial flowers, like for example the Welsh poppy, because the hoops would probably only last a couple of years. Once the poppies finish flowering and I've harvested the ornamental seed heads, I will remove the hoops and lower the compost level to just below the lip of the pot. Tulip roots grow in all directions, so as Princess Irene comes out of dormancy, roots will spread upwards to benefit from additional moisture retained in the now larger volume of compost. Occasionally, I leave it so long to pot on a poppy into a decent sized container that it just goes ahead and flowers anyway, with an adorable little one-day bonsai bloom. This is a Shirley poppy, the Victorian cultivar of our native field poppy. The smaller the pot, the tinier the flower, and conversely, the bigger the container, the larger and more floriferous your poppy plant will be. This corner of the patio is known as the dining room display, enjoyed from both indoor and outdoor dining areas. And for me, the divinely blue Agapanthus called Brilliant Blue, with its ethereal glow in the evening light, really emphasises the value of blue-toned flowers in a border or container display. They seem to add a depth and coolness that somehow pulls even the most eclectic mix of colours like ours together as if everything belongs. I bought this plant at a local nursery about 2 months ago, lured in by the fact it was already bearing buds when all our existing Agapanthus were only just coming out of cold season hibernation from the pop-up overwintering tents, at which point one of us said,
"Il n'y a tout simplement pas de place pour une autre agapanthe."
To which one of us pleaded, "It's only little." To which one of us replied,
"Nous ne trouverons même pas un peu d'espace."
But the thing about Agapanthus is that they are such truly beautiful plants. There is always room in the heart for just one more. Agapanthus Brilliant Blue is a herbaceous perennial, loves full sun and prefers a sheltered spot, will grow in any moist, well-drained soil or compost, is superb in containers or front to middle borders, has compact semi-evergreen leaves, flowers up to 50 centimetres or 20 inches tall, is hardy down to -10 to -5 Celsius or 14 to 23 Fahrenheit, is brilliant for bees, brings happiness to hoverflies. Back in March, we planted perennial purple wallflower Super Bowl Mauve, which is a more compact and slightly earlier blooming variety than the similar and incredibly popular long-flowering Bowles Mauve cultivar. We potted the plants up into plastic containers placed into the rotund cretonne pots either side of the sunny raised bed within a mini hedge of euonymus, and these wallflowers did not disappoint. They have bloomed non-stop for 4 months and delighted us by bringing so many butterflies into the garden. But over time, they became more and more leggy, and I kept intending to prune them back to stimulate new growth and more flowers. But every time I picked up the secateurs, I would see a butterfly happily foraging on them and just couldn't bring myself to make the cut. And one of the reasons we are so thrilled to see butterflies is that last year was declared a UK butterfly emergency due to declining numbers. It was one of the worst on UK records for many once ubiquitous species, including this, the small tortoiseshell, but happily numbers seem healthier this year. Eventually there were so few flowers remaining on the stalks, I knew it was time for action. Now, if you were short on time for this kind of job, it would be perfectly acceptable to just chop the stalks back in a few swift actions of the garden shears down to the tighter leafy growth below, avoiding any pretty overhanging plants like this hydrangea branch. But I plan on going through with the secateurs a little more time-consumingly and checking each stalk for lower branching sections with any new buds forming on them. And I'm also leaving some of the smaller flower stems in place so that there are still a few sweet nectar sources here for foraging insects. This is our first year of growing Super Bowl Mauve, and as it doesn't set seed readily, I'm not entirely sure how cutting back produces more flowers. Perhaps it just reveals new blooms rather than generating a greater quantity, but if it's anything like Bowles Mauve, then the cut followed by lots of water and a liquid feed with fertiliser should help produce more flowers. Another new plant to our garden this year, a summer annual, seen here with a sprinkling of rambling rose petals scattered over them. Begonia Nonstop Rose Petticoat, ideal for containers or impactful mass bedding. I cannot believe they have so far evaded the interest of hungry slugs. I'm sure I have the dear frogs to thank for quietly going about their gastropod patrol, almost unseen day and night. I can't help thinking how utterly fabulous a bunch of these begonias would look in the Cretan urns. They would create instant eye-catching impact with the contrast of the dark green surround of the mini euonymus hedge. But they do not seem to attract butterflies the way wallflowers do, or sustain smaller pollinators, which the smaller flowered semperflorens begonias do perfectly. So from an insect perspective, they probably don't achieve a top score, but in terms of purely aesthetic satisfaction, we love their flounce and intensity of colour and the delicious sense of lushness they evoke. And they're just getting started. I particularly enjoy the harmonious clash with the bluer toned pink of Salvia Ping Pong, a gorgeous and energising duo, the floral equivalent of a caffeine fix in the morning. Please don't be dismayed should you purchase these or raise them from seed and find that shortly after potting on, a few of your precious flowers suddenly drop off. This just seems an initial kind of settling in trauma, but once established, these begonia prove pretty durable. We have 3 pots lining the narrow passageway at the back of the container display. It's not even the entire width of a paving slab, and it means I brush past, no pun intended, and graze the flower heads as I move up and down deadheading, and I've never yet had one single flower drop on contact. These begonias have body armour beneath the petticoats. Here's their flower profile. This is a tropical perennial grown as a tender annual, enjoys sun or semi-shade, prefers shelter from strong winds, likes moist, well-drained soil or compost, is long blooming from summer to autumn, can grow up to 50 centimetres or 20 inches high and wide. Minimum tolerated temperatures are 10 to 15 Celsius or 50 to 59 Fahrenheit. Salvia Amistad generously gives so much plant for the pot, and the advantage here of growing it in a container is that it's not fully UK hardy and hates cold wet roots, so in a harsh winter we can tuck it away somewhere sheltered for protection. Amistad's velvety indigo tubular flowers are held by currant coloured papery calyces and bloom on tall leafy stems from May to November, attracting bees and sometimes beautiful hummingbird hawk moths. As the low evening light streams through petals, it glows with glorious stained glass intensity. It is a hugely thirsty plant in a pot, so during dry spells, having a dish beneath it to catch every drop of water from your can is a good plan. While despite the current period of calm, dry and hot weather, at least hot by our UK standards, there have been many destructively strong winds this year, and at the start of May, a forceful gust split this salvia in two. So where the central stem branched off, the two pieces were torn apart down to soil level. Absolute disaster, but not all was lost. I bound the split stems together with insulation tape, then twisted soft coat garden wire around the taped section for added stability and used canes for extra support to stop the plant swaying in the wind. And 6 weeks later, Amistad is flourishing again after the emergency flower fix-up. When it comes to plant maintenance, we sometimes think we are doing everything right, but frustratingly things still go wrong. We know that to keep our Folgate lavender in lovely, neat, dense mounds, we need to trim it back hard, straight after flowering finishes, not into old hard wood, but leaving only about an inch or so of leafy growth around it. And over winter, the domes of lavender look very tight and pleasing. I value their sculptural presence so much in the cold months of the quiet winter garden. But now in June, whilst the saturated blue, fragrant flower heads are a heavenly feast for the senses and for pollinators, the plants have suddenly become woody, leggy and sprawling. They've changed so quickly. I have been trying to understand why this would happen to a well-pruned plant, and I've found something to blame other than my technique. The wind, the same culprit that dramatically split our Salvia Amistad in two. We know that exposure to wind changes the cellular makeup of plants in different ways. For example, to stop transpiration, preventing the drying effects of wind on soft stems, or making cells denser to resist the impactful force of wind. And my admittedly tentative theory is that our lavender in the exposed centre of the garden has responded this way to the buffeting effects of all the windstorms. So how do I fix this? There are two options. After flowering, I can gently push the plant stems together and secure with garden twine or soft-coated garden wire, and then trim into neater mounds. However, the drawback of this approach is that the fresh new growth in the centre of the plant would be crowded out and would probably die from lack of light or reduced air circulation. The second option is to take a deep breath, be brave and cut into hard wood and hope the lavender regenerates from the tough old stems. This is not impossible, as English lavender cultivars can be successfully revitalised in this way, and there are already signs of new leafage sprouting from old wood. But there is never any foolproof guarantee that this method works every time. While we weigh up our options, we will just relax, gently inhale and enjoy that utterly dreamy blue haze. On this summer solstice, the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere and the longest daylight chronicle in the garden's annual journal, we say a heartfelt thank you for the company of new friends and old friends who've joined us here before. Until next time, we wish you all the most flowerful times and nature-soothed minds.
Ça, c'est magnifique.